Your great-grandmother fed 7 people on 12 cents a day in 1932, with a clay pot, a small bag of pinto beans, and a half stick of lard stretched across a week. She cooked inside a converted Southern Pacific boxcar outside El Paso, the wheels pulled off, the floor swept twice a day. Number 19 on this list fed cotton pickers in the Salt River Valley for 44 cents per 100 pounds. Number 14 was the meal mothers cooked the night a federal repatriation agent walked your camp. Number 7 cost less than a penny per cup. Here's what most people miss about these recipes. These 25 meals fed a generation of migrants from Sonora to the Salt River Valley. Then we threw them away the moment we could afford to. Hit subscribe before this list ends. Here are the 25 cheap meals Mexican migrants ate to survive the 1930s. Number 25, frijoles de la olla. A clay pot sat on a kerosene burner in a railroad camp outside Laredo, lid clattering against the rim, the smell of pinto beans and onions soaking into every blanket in the boxcar. Pinto beans, water, half an onion, a clove of garlic, a single dried chile, a knuckle of lard if there was any. The cook sorted the beans on a piece of newspaper, picked out the stones, rinsed them twice in well water, then let them simmer 4 hours while she boiled the children's clothes in a tub outside. By the time her husband came in from laying track, the broth had turned a deep brown that tasted of smoke. She ladled it over yesterday's tortilla and called it supper. A pot like this fed 6 adults for under 15 cents. The pot didn't lie about what it was. It simply kept feeding people who needed feeding. Beans, water, fire, time, 4 ingredients in 4 hours, and the kitchen stayed alive. Number 24, tortillas de maíz con sal. A comal heated on a wood stove in a tent kitchen outside McAllen, Texas. The iron so dark it looked black against the canvas wall. Masa, water, a pinch of salt. 3 ingredients made the dough. The mother pinched off a ball, pressed it between 2 squares of waxed paper, and slapped it onto the hot iron with the side of her palm. The tortilla puffed in 8 seconds. She slid it onto a folded cloth, sprinkled the top with coarse salt, and rolled it up while it was still steaming. A child ate it walking back to the cotton row. A dozen tortillas cost 3 cents to make in 1933 and would carry a family of 5 through a long workday. They tasted like corn and wood smoke and patience. A tortilla and a pinch of salt was breakfast for the children who picked the cotton. The simple meal worked because nothing else could. Number 23, sopa de fideo. A pot of thin tomato broth on a back burner stove in a Colonia kitchen in South Phoenix, the air smelling of toasted vermicelli and cumin. A handful of fideo noodles, a quartered tomato, half an onion, a single clove of garlic, water, salt. The mother browned the dry noodles in a teaspoon of lard until they smelled like burnt almonds, then poured the tomato broth over them and let it bubble for 10 minutes until the pasta drank the soup. The pasta had walked from Spain to New Spain in the conquistadors' kit and had become a Mexican dry soup 3 centuries before the Depression touched it. In a Salt River Valley camp, it cost 5 cents a pot and stretched to feed 4. The mother ladled it over a heel of tortilla and called the children in from the irrigation ditch. They ate it standing up. 2 minutes, and the bowls were empty. Number 22, caldo de papa. A potato broth on the back of an open fire in a citrus camp outside Riverside, California, the cook squatting beside the coals with a tin spoon. 3 potatoes, half an onion, a clove of garlic, a tomato when there was one, water, salt, a sprig of cilantro from the dooryard. The cook sliced the potatoes thin so they'd cook in 12 minutes, scooped a single tablespoon of lard from a coffee can, and let the broth simmer until the kitchen smelled like rain on hot dirt. A pot of caldo de papa cost less than 4 cents in 1934 and fed 5 field hands after a 13-hour day picking oranges. The broth carried no meat at all. Now, the potatoes carried the meal. A bowl of caldo and 1 folded tortilla was supper for a man who had walked 7 miles back to camp. You ate it while you could still feel your hands. Number 21, arroz con leche. A pot of rice and milk on the back burner in a tar paper shack outside Bakersfield. The cook stirring with a wooden spoon worn smooth by 20 years of stirring. white rice, canned evaporated milk, water, a stick of cinnamon, a strip of orange peel, a handful of sugar when sugar could be afforded. She cooked the rice slow until each grain swelled and split, then poured the milk in and let the pot thicken to the texture of pudding. A serving cost about 3 cents in 1935. The cinnamon stick had been used 4 times already and would be used twice more. She spooned it warm into chipped enamel cups and handed one to each child as they came in from the field. Arroz con leche was the closest thing to dessert a migrant child knew. It tasted like Sunday in a kitchen with no calendar. You cleaned the cup with a finger. Number 20. Atole de avena. A pot of oatmeal thinned to a drink, kept warm on a kerosene stove in a beet camp outside Greeley, Colorado, before the sun came up. Rolled oats, water, canned milk, a stick of cinnamon, a piece of piloncillo the size of a walnut. The cook simmered the oats until they fell apart, then thinned them with milk until you could pour the porridge into a tin cup and drink it while you walked. Atole de avena cost under 2 cents per cup in 1933 and warmed a child's stomach for the first 3 hours of a sugar beet harvest. The cinnamon and piloncillo did all the work the meat couldn't afford to do. A mother handed a cup to each child as they laced their boots in the dark. They drank it on the way to the field. They didn't stop walking. Your boots kept moving because your stomach had work to do. Number 19. Café de olla con piloncillo. A coffee in a clay pot, simmered slow on a wood fire in a traquero camp outside Topeka, Kansas, where 100 Mexican railroad workers lived in 2 converted Southern Pacific boxcars stacked end to end. Ground coffee, water, a stick of canela, a piece of piloncillo the size of a child's fist, a single clove. The cook poured cold water over the grounds in the clay pot, dropped in the cinnamon and the cone of brown sugar, and let it steep on the edge of the coals for 18 minutes until the liquid turned the color of wet bark. She ladled it into tin cups with no handles, and the men drank it standing up before they walked to the rail. A cup of café de olla cost less than half a cent in 1932. It was the only thing in the camp that tasted like home, and the only thing that didn't get rationed when wages were cut from 35 cents an hour to 23 cents an hour that October. The Southern Pacific had given the workers the boxcars in 1924, the company telling them they would always have a place to sleep beside the tracks they laid. By the spring of 1932, the company was telling those same workers they would be better off in Mexico with their own people. A repatriation train left El Paso every 2 weeks. The cook poured café de olla into the tin cups of men who would be on a southbound train by Friday. She didn't say anything when she handed the cup over. The clay pot kept simmering. The cinnamon stick had been in service for 9 months. They drank the coffee. They walked to the work. They didn't look at the calendar. Number 18. Papas con huevo. A skillet on a single propane ring in a tent camp outside Edinburgh, Texas. 2 diced potatoes turning soft in a teaspoon of lard, the smell of onions sweet enough to wake the children in the next bed. 3 eggs, beaten in a chipped bowl with a fork, poured over the potatoes when the dice had a brown edge. The cook scrambled it together for 90 seconds, salted it, scraped it onto a folded tortilla, and handed the wrapped breakfast to her husband as he walked out the door. Papas con huevo cost about 4 cents per serving in 1934. It was the meal that kept a cotton picker upright until his 10 o'clock break. It used what was already in the kitchen and asked for nothing extra. The skillet was washed with sand if there wasn't soap. The next morning, the same skillet would do it again. 3 eggs and a potato made the difference between a man finishing his row and a man losing his job. Number 17. Frijoles refritos con manteca. Yesterday's beans, a black iron skillet, 2 spoonfuls of saved bacon fat, a pinch of salt. The mother dumped the cold beans into the hot fat, mashed them with the back of a wooden spoon, and stirred until the paste pulled away from the pan in a single dark sheet. The trick was patience. She let the beans crust on the bottom, scraped them up, let them crust again, scraped them up again. 12 minutes of stirring turned a pot of plain frijoles into something that tasted of smoke and salt and an animal nobody had been able to afford that month. A scoop of refritos on a tortilla fed a working man for the first half of a workday. The dish cost almost nothing because the beans had already been paid for. The lard came from a slaughtered pig somewhere up the road. The salt came from the company store on credit that never quite zeroed out. You ate yesterday's beans tomorrow because nothing in your kitchen was wasted. Number 16. Tortillas de manteca con sal. A flour tortilla, hot off the comal, sprinkled with coarse salt, rolled into a tube while the steam still rose off it. Flour, lard, salt, water. 4 ingredients made the recipe. The mother cut a knob of lard the size of a walnut into 2 cups of flour, worked it through with her fingers until it looked like wet sand, added warm water by the tablespoon until the dough held a thumbprint. She rolled out 12 tortillas before the comal cooled. The children ate them standing in the doorway, salt on their lips, the lard rich enough to pass for breakfast. A dozen tortillas de manteca cost 6 cents in 1933 and could be made in 20 minutes. There was a folk song the children sang while she rolled them. She didn't sing along, she kept rolling. The simple flour tortilla, hot and salty, was the cheap fuel that walked your children into the cotton row before sunrise. Number 15. Calabaza con piloncillo. A pumpkin from a roadside garden, halved and seeded, simmered in a clay pot with water, a stick of cinnamon, 2 pieces of piloncillo, a spoonful of anise seed. The cook let it bubble for an hour until the orange flesh turned to candy and the syrup thickened to molasses. A bowl of calabaza con piloncillo was Sunday dinner in a camp outside San Bernardino in November of 1934. The pumpkin was free. The piloncillo cost a nickel a cone. The whole pot fed 8 people. The grandmother served it warm in tin cups, ladling the syrup on top, and the children drank the syrup last like it was tea. The dish dated to before the Spanish, calabaza, one of the 3 sisters of pre-Columbian agriculture. 300 years of Mexican kitchens later, it was still the cheapest dessert your migrant family could put on the table. A simple pot of pumpkin and brown sugar, ancient as anything in your kitchen, did better work than any candy bar. Number 14. Lentejas con plátano. A pot of brown lentils on the back of a wood stove in a packing house barrio in San Antonio, the cook adding sliced ripe banana in the last 10 minutes of cooking. Lentils, water, half an onion, a clove of garlic, a slice of bacon if there was bacon, a banana from the corner stand, salt. The banana sounded strange to the white grocer who sold the lentils, but the dish came north from Veracruz with a generation of migrants and had landed in Texas before the turn of the century. The fruit melted into the broth and turned the lentils sweet enough that a hungry child would eat a second bowl. A pot of lentejas con plátano cost about 7 cents in 1935 and fed 5. The cook served it with a torn tortilla and a slice of raw onion. The leftovers were breakfast. This was the meal mothers cooked the night a federal repatriation agent walked the camp because the dish stretched twice as far as plain lentils and could feed a family that might be on a southbound boxcar by Tuesday. Between 1929 and 1936, federal, state, and local authorities pushed an estimated 1.8 million people of Mexican descent across the border, the majority of them U.S. citizens, and the Veracruz lentils your grandmother stirred in San Antonio traveled south with them. Your dinner had a passport, your recipe had a route home. Number 13. Caldo de res con hueso. A beef shin bone simmered 4 hours with potato, carrot, cabbage, and a half ear of corn in a railroad camp kitchen outside Houston. The bone cost 6 cents from a butcher who threw in 2 extra knuckles because the cook brought him a plate of refritos every Friday. The mother let the broth boil down until it tasted like meat, even though there was almost no meat on the bone. She stirred in chunks of cabbage, halved potatoes, segments of corn, a quartered onion, salt, a pinch of dried oregano. The pot fed 9 people for 2 days. They ate the broth with a torn tortilla and saved the marrow for the youngest child, scooping it out of the bone with the back of a knife. A bowl of caldo with marrow was a small medicine. A bowl of caldo without marrow was still supper. Your bone bought a week. Your refritos paid the butcher. Number 12. Machaca de res seca con huevo. A handful of dried shredded beef, pounded thin with the back of a knife, scrambled with 3 eggs and a quartered tomato in a black skillet outside a labor barracks in Yuma, Arizona. The beef had been salted and hung in mesh cages on the side of the cook's house for 10 days the previous summer, dried by the desert wind into something that would keep without ice for half a year. A man could carry a pound of machaca in a paper bag from El Paso to Phoenix and lose nothing to spoilage. The cook rehydrated a fistful in warm water for 10 minutes, drained it, and tossed it into the eggs. Machaca con huevo was breakfast for the man before he walked out to a pre-dawn freight gang. It cost 5 cents on a morning when fresh beef would have cost a quarter. The machaca itself was older than the railroad. It was older than the border. Your dried beef was your refrigerator. Your sun was your power bill. Number 11. Chile con queso de rancho. A skillet of melted ranch cheese, roasted green chile, a chopped tomato, half an onion, simmered slow on a kerosene stove in a Colonia kitchen in Las Cruces. The cheese came from a neighbor who kept 3 goats. The chili had been roasted and peeled and frozen in a snowbank the previous October, pulled out 1 bag at a time as winter ran on. The cook stirred it down to a thick gold paste, scooped it onto torn pieces of yesterday's tortilla, and handed a plate to her husband and a plate to the 2 children at the table. A serving cost about 4 cents in 1933 because the cheese and the chili had been bartered, not bought. The dish predated the Velveeta version by a generation. It was thick enough to stand a spoon in. It tasted of wood smoke and goat milk and the dry heat of a New Mexico summer. Your barter network paid for the meal. The grocery store didn't. Number 10. Sopita de elote. A small pot of corn soup on a back burner in a packing shed kitchen outside Stockton, California, 3 ears of fresh corn cut off the cob, half an onion, a single tomato, water, a teaspoon of lard, salt. The cook scraped the cob with the back of a knife to release the corn milk into the pot, the trick the grandmothers swore by, the trick that made a cheap soup taste like cream. She let it simmer 12 minutes. The corn cost 2 cents an ear in 1934 from a farmer who couldn't sell his crop fast enough at market price. A whole pot of sopita de elote cost a nickel and fed 6. She ladled it into chipped bowls, dropped a sliver of fresh chili on top, and handed it to her oldest daughter to deliver to the men still in the field. They ate it from the bowl with no spoons. Your hands washed in the irrigation ditch. Your spoon was the lip of the bowl. Number 9. Taquitos de papa fritos en manteca. Boiled potatoes, mashed and seasoned with salt and a sliver of green onion, rolled into a corn tortilla and fried in a half-inch of lard until the outside cracked under a fork. The cook stood at the stove for an hour, rolling 15 taquitos at a time, dropping them into the hot lard 4 at a time, fishing them out with a wire strainer. She stacked them on a folded cloth and the children carried them to the field at lunchtime wrapped in newspaper. Taquitos de papa cost about 3 cents apiece to make in 1934, and a child could eat 4 of them after a morning of cotton picking. The lard had been used to fry chilies the day before and would be strained and used to fry beans tomorrow. Nothing was wasted in a kitchen that had nothing to spare. The taquito was small. The hunger wasn't. Your lunch was crisp, salty, and gone in 2 minutes. Number 8. Frijoles puercos. A pot of mashed pinto beans cooked down with chorizo, melted cheese, and a roasted chili, set out on a table for a Sunday afternoon meal in a labor barrio outside Lubbock, Texas. The dish was named for being heavy, not for the pork. The cook stirred a quarter pound of crumbled chorizo into a pot of refried beans, melted in a handful of crumbled queso fresco, dropped in a single fire-roasted chile pasilla. She let the whole thing thicken until a tortilla could lift it off the plate without breaking. A bowl cost about 9 cents in 1935 because chorizo cost more than plain beans. It was a Sunday dish, not a workday dish. A man saved his appetite for it the way another man saved for a Saturday film. Frijoles puercos was Sunday food in a week with no other Sunday markers. Your week didn't have weekends. Your bowl of frijoles puercos was the closest thing. Number 7. Capirotada de Quaresma. A bread pudding for Lent, layered with toasted bolillo, dark piloncillo syrup, raisins, peanuts, and a thick slice of ranch cheese, baked in a clay dish in a kitchen outside Fresno on the Friday before Easter. The cook used the bread that had gone stale during the week. No waste, no apology. She dissolved a cone of piloncillo in water with a stick of cinnamon and 3 cloves, made a dark syrup, and poured it over the layered bread until each slice drank the sugar through. The cheese melted. The raisins swelled. A pan of capirotada cost about 11 cents to make in 1934 and fed 12 people on a day when no meat was allowed in the house. The dish carried a Catholic memory and a peasant economy in the same bite. Every layer meant something. The bread was the body, the syrup was the blood, the cheese was the shroud. A migrant family said the rosary over a hot pan. Your stale bread became a sacrament before it became a dessert. Number 6. Arroz con frijoles refritos. White rice, plain, refried beans, plain, a folded tortilla on the side, a wedge of pickled onion if there was one. The cook in a Salinas Valley camp made this dish 4 nights a week through the winter of 1933. The rice from a 50-pound sack she split with 2 other families at the company store. The beans from the same sack of pinto she'd been working through since November. She cooked the rice with a quartered tomato and half an onion until each grain was distinct. She mounded a heap of beans next to a heap of rice on each plate. A serving cost under 3 cents. The dish carried no meat. The dish carried no garnish. 2 starches, a fold of tortilla, and salt. A working man cleaned the plate in 4 minutes. He stood up and walked back into the field. Your dinner had one job and your dinner did it. Number 5. Caldo de pollo con fideo. A whole chicken back, 2 wings, a neck, simmered an hour with carrot and celery and onion, then poured over a cup of toasted vermicelli in a Colonia kitchen outside El Centro, California. The chicken parts cost 8 cents from a butcher who was glad to be rid of them. The fideo had been browned in a teaspoon of lard until it smelled like burnt almonds. The cook dropped the noodles into the boiling broth in the last 6 minutes, and the soup thickened around them. A bowl of caldo de pollo con fideo fed 4 for under 12 cents in 1933. Here's the simple part. The grandmother served it with a wedge of lime and a folded tortilla. She told the children to eat it slow because there wasn't a second bowl. They ate it slow. The bowls came back empty. The pot was washed out and put back on the shelf. You learned to slow down because the next chicken was a week away. Number 4. Nopales con huevo. Strips of cactus paddle, simmered 10 minutes in salted water to draw out the slime, drained, then scrambled with 3 eggs and half an onion in a black skillet outside a tent kitchen near Brawley, California. The nopales were free. They grew along every fence line in the Imperial Valley and along the edge of every railroad bed in southern Arizona. A child could be sent out with a pair of canvas gloves and a paring knife and come back with a paper bag of paddles in 20 minutes. The cook trimmed off the spines, cut the paddles into strips, and cooked them down. The eggs cost about 4 cents for 3. The whole dish cost less than a nickel and fed 3 people. Nopales con huevo was breakfast in the long stretches of the year when the wages came late and the company store stopped extending credit. The desert paid the bill. Your fence line was your grocery aisle. Your paring knife was your cart. Number 3. Salsa de molcajete con tortilla. A volcanic stone bowl, a pestle worn smooth by 40 years of grinding, 2 roasted tomatoes, 2 roasted chiles, a clove of garlic, a pinch of salt. The grandmother in a camp outside Fort Worth ground the salsa fresh every day at sunset, the same bowl her mother had used in Guanajuato, carried north on a wagon in 1916, and never set down since. The salsa took 6 minutes to grind. A spoonful on a hot tortilla was supper when there was nothing else in the house. The dish cost almost nothing because the chiles came from a roadside vendor who traded for a bowl of refritos, and the tomatoes came from a neighbor's garden. The molcajete itself was older than the kitchen. It was older than the boxcar the kitchen sat inside. It was older than the country the boxcar was parked in. Your stone bowl outlived your border. Your salsa outlived your wages. Number 2. Atole blanco con masa. A drink made from corn masa, water, a stick of cinnamon, a piece of piloncillo, set on a kerosene stove before sunrise in a camp outside Bryan, Texas. The cook dissolved a fistful of masa in cold water, stirred it into a pot of boiling water with the cinnamon and the piloncillo, and let it thicken to the texture of cream. A cup of atole blanco cost under a penny in 1932 and warmed a sugar beet child for the first 2 hours of a 14-hour day. The drink was older than the Spanish. The drink was older than the wheel. A grandmother had been pouring it into a tin cup for a child going to a field for 9 straight generations on the same continent. She handed her granddaughter a cup. The girl walked outside. The kitchen kept simmering until the next child came down the steps. Your masa was alive before your country was born. Number 1. Tortilla con manteca y sal. A hot corn tortilla. A smear of lard. A pinch of coarse salt. A roll. The whole meal fit on a child's palm. The cook in a Salt River Valley cotton camp made this for her 4 children every morning in the autumn of 1934 and again at 4 in the afternoon when they came back from the field for a 15-minute break. A dozen tortillas cost 3 cents to make. The lard came from a coffee can on the back of the stove. The salt came from a paper sack on the shelf. A child ate 2 of them in 90 seconds and was back in the row before the foreman counted heads. There was no chorizo, no egg, no bean, no chili. There was a tortilla, a smear of lard, a pinch of salt, and a child who needed to keep working. The meal was not poverty. The meal was engineering. Make one of these this week. Just one. Soak a bag of pinto beans tonight, cook them slow tomorrow, and eat them with a torn tortilla and a pinch of salt. Or pour cold milk over a pot of cooked rice and stir in a stick of cinnamon. Eat it standing up at the counter the way your great-grandmother did before her husband walked to the rail. Tell me in the comments which one your family still cooks and which one disappeared after the boxcars stopped running. Because these meals were not poverty cuisine. They were the cheap, simple engineering that let a generation of migrants survive a country that wanted them gone.